Dun dun dun. Welcome everybody to Religion Zero number 52. Look at that. Always on the button. Brooks always on the button. He's got it.
I do my best. I do my best, yes.
Our one sound effect will go far, you know.
It's the one time I get to use the soundboard on this this roadcaster, so I enjoy it.
That's great. All right. We're talking about technology in religion, and I'm guessing most people will be confused on how these interact, but I will talk deeply about how these interact. This is one of my passion projects of things I like to talk about. So y'all get ready for that. You're going to hear a lot of stuff that you've probably never heard before. And then we could maybe even get into the conspiracy theories of why you've never heard of this stuff before. But first, let's talk about what's been going on last week for you, Brooke. How was it?
Oh, it's been quiet, man. It's been absolutely quiet. Nothing really amazing happening. The weather is fantastic. We got up to about 25 degrees Celsius out here. Don't know how that converts. That's probably like 60 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Not exactly sure.
A good temperature. Yeah.
The good, yes, is not too hot, not too cold. Lots of sunshine. I've been getting some vitamin D. So that's definitely been a plus. Yeah, not much happening out here. We're coming out of the lockdown slowly. I think Friday of this week we have another review, and it's going to be easing the restrictions for outdoor meetings up to 30 people, and I think up to 3 or 4 or 5 houses can actually meet together in the same place. So yeah, I've been doing that. Been going out to the pub, trying to patronize the local markets. One of my favorite places hasn't reopened, which has been this fantastic place. I get this meat stack of 4 burger patties, eggs, sausage, and bacon all in a stack. They haven't reopened, so I'm a little concerned about that. Hopefully they made it through the pandemic, and they'll be reopened soon. But yeah, I'm just kind of seeing what the carnage is. And next week I'm actually going up to London for 1 day. Not even a full day. I'm going up for like 6 hours. So for those who don't know, I'm a trustee on the board of the Trinidad and Tobago Association UK, which is a charity that helps people of Caribbean diaspora in Europe. And we're doing a soup kitchen. So I'm going to be going out there to show my face, cut up some vegetables, do a little cooking, do a little serving. And I'm getting back to Wales that same day because I got a meeting in the evening. So pray for me, guys. That's going to be a long day. I got to give 7 hours of travel. So
do you know what the hardest part of cutting up vegetables is?
What's that?
Getting through the wheelchair, Boom.
Dude, that's terrible.
Yeah.
What about you, man? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
This week's actually been pretty hot, and I hate it.
Oh, nice.
For us, it's in the 80s, which is, to me, 70 is too hot because I live as a cold caveman polar bear mode. So it's been miserable. My car doesn't have AC for like 3 years. I've gotten it fixed 3 times, and each time it only lasted 2 weeks. And I'm like, I'm just not going to pay for it anymore because I don't want to throw down, $500 or to $1,000 for them to fix it, and then it quits in 2 weeks. I'm not paying $1,000 for 2 weeks of air conditioning. So I'm just doing the 70 down AC unit, which is you roll the windows down, go 70.
Well, they don't even have handles anymore. It's a button now, but yeah.
A lot less dynamic, but and my job is mostly driving and being outside anyway, so it's that time of the year where I'm just going to be miserable. So I've been Googling all week, like what are the lightest, most breathable dress pants of all time, so I don't sweat my balls off all summer, because we still have a dress code here, so it's kind of weird. But so I was like, I'm purposely just like Googling every type of fabric that could look like it could be dress pants, and just like, how can I not die this year? Last year was pretty brutal, so I'm trying to get ahead of the game.
I get you. I mean, even for me out here, I have to put the fan. So I actually bought a stand-up fan that I sleep with. I had to put on these basically my gym trousers, my shorts. That's what I'm wearing around the house, and of course the t-shirt. So because everything's locked up to keep the sound out, so it does get pretty warm in here if there's a lot of sun. So I totally feel you on that heat issue.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm not a hot guy, so not a fan. Gym's been going good though. My gyms are opened up.
Good.
I found a, I think I don't know if we talked about it last week, but yeah, I found a gym that no face mask requirements and no nothing. And it's actually a cop and firefighter and emergency responder gym.
Cool.
And so it's not just for them, but they just get like a 50% discount. And they actually put me in there because technically I'm in the health field. So,
right.
And so he actually gave me the EMT discount. So it's kind of interesting, even though I don't know anything about that.
That's awesome, man. The gym reopening has been a very big thing for me. I didn't go on Friday. I just woke up and obviously I felt like I had a salt deficiency, so I was cramping and stuff like that. So I had to up my salt. But yeah, looking forward to hitting it next week, getting back into the groove of it. So and I saw your video about your favorite bench, by the way. That was pretty cool as well.
Yeah. Yesterday, like I just didn't want to be in the house. So I literally just drove around for about 5 hours, just random streets in my neighborhood I've never been to. And like I found this cemetery that was it was like huge. It was massive. It was like a square mile. It felt like it was massive. And so I just drove around it through all the little winding roads and stuff. And then I just look over in my corner and I'm like, that's the weirdest freaking bench I've ever seen in my life. It's a bench facing nothing. It's facing an empty field with overgrown weeds and grass and like trees that weren't trimmed and all this stuff. And behind it is like the fanciest, nicest part of the graveyard. Yes. But it's the bench is facing all of the uncut grass away from all of it. And I'm like, this is my favorite bench. This is amazing.
That's cool. You put that on your Instagram, was it, or your Facebook story? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I put a Facebook story, and then I just got Snapchat for the first time. So I threw that up there too.
Sweet. So anybody who want to go and see it,
medias. Yeah,
they can go onto your Snapchat. You can put your links below.
Oh boy, I don't know if you want to go on there. But yeah,
awesome.
But yeah, that was basically my weekend. A lot of sweating to death and exploring because I didn't feel like being home.
Not bad. Sounds like you had a good time.
Oh yeah. All right. So on to topic, and that's actually a good segue about why I like that bench. We'll get into it. We'll cliff notes it for later. But we're talking about technology and religion, and I think most people see technology as a net good. Like sometimes people see some cons to it, but it's mostly pros, and we're happy how far we got in society and civilization. And my goal by the end of this is to have you at least question that. And we'll get into it, and we'll specifically talk about it from a religious aspect as well. But first, I just want to start about what's the history of technology. What have been all of the technological breakthroughs throughout human history that completely changed the entire way the world works, not just one civilization. And, there's always been those big, benchmarks that completely changed how entire human society is involved. Right. So, I mean, if we're going to the beginnings of human history, I think the oldest anatomically accurate humans we found are about 300,000 years old. Have you heard that number?
Yeah, I'd give that a pass.
Yeah. It's like it's 200 to 300,000 is like which is most people assume cavemen, but no, that's identical to us. Like same brain, same skull structure, same intelligence, same
Homo sapiens.
Yeah. We're all slightly shorter back then, but that's all based on nutrient stuff, right?
Yeah, agriculture.
Yeah. It's yeah, so we're slightly different, like size and stature and bone density and teeth, actually. But overall, they were pretty much genetically identical humans to us. And actually, there is actually some overlap, they say, with like Cro-Magnon cavemen too. So there's times actually both of us existed at the same time. Yeah, kind of like the whole chimp bonobo thing. They're almost completely identical, but they're still technically a different species, but they look near identical, and like same intelligence. They just have completely different societies, and that's how it was. They believe that like Cro-Magnon and early humans were actually like rubbing elbows together, right? But they had their own separate structures and societies. I think they said Cro-Magnon, like both species were high testosterone, the male and the females. They're a lot more a grunt. That's where we get the stereotype from. It's because there wasn't any gender roles, which is interesting. That the male and female were both like very stocky, dense, muscle heavy uh, species. They were a lot less different than we have now of male and female.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that cool? But they died out and we did not. So, so we're talking about technology throughout history. You got to start with what's the beginning of us, and it's 200 and 300,000 years ago, beginning on who you ask, right?
Sure.
So we're gonna go with there. When do you think the first biggest technology was made that changed everything? By the way, we already had sticks and weapons and stones and spears and crap like pre-human. So
right. I mean,
yeah.
I think
we're not using those. Yeah.
Yeah, fire would have come before that. The wheel probably around that time. So I mean, first technology for the incarnation of Homo sapiens.
Yeah. And most people have it debatable, but it's pretty, they're pretty all in line together. So it's like two or three small things that all kind of came together at the same time.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. I mean, a lot of that stuff kind of predates, the societal structure, the groupthink, the hunting. It would be the advent of agriculture would be the big thing when they actually start tilling the ground and settling in locations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, you're pretty much on there. The concept of domesticating things, both plants and animals.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Right.
So we started, even though it's not technology like you think, like a computer or a gun, but the ability to domesticate things is a new technology, right?
Yeah, it led to mass farming and settling of civilization. Sure.
So then you start getting shepherds and you start getting farms and you start getting things like that. And then pretty soon after that, relative to human history, we started doing written language, which is interesting how those two go together. And we'll definitely get into that, even though it sounds like two random things. But
I don't know if that's entirely fair, because the ancient, the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthals, they had a written language. It just wasn't very good. It was cave paintings, right?
Yeah, cave paintings. It was art, right?
It was art, yeah. Which is, but it is trying to communicate, right? It's trying to tell a story. So it wasn't very good, but the idea was there.
Yeah, but it's interesting how those come together. And this is also around the time. So this is also, we started making small towns instead of like villages or huts or nomadic life. This is where you start seeing actual named towns in the very beginnings of human history, like Sumerian and random things like that. And these are all anywhere from like 4,000 to 10,000 years ago, depending on who you ask, right?
Sure.
Of when those first started. So why that's interesting is because if we can even be, conservative and say out of 200,000 years of human experience, only the last 8,000 or so have we had agriculture and written language in towns. So that's like 2% of the entire human existence is even written
I would
down.
agree.
Yeah. And so this is going to be a big point moving forward. And this is around the same technological age of like the Pentateuch, right? The first 5 books of the Bible. They didn't have guns, but they had farming. They had domesticated animals. They had towns everywhere, some bigger than others. Some of them, had kings and rulers. Some didn't. But like Genesis, in that era of Genesis, this is around the technological age-ish they're at, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they had domesticated animals, they had written language, and they had towns instead of just, people in villages and huts and, tribe life. So
I'd say that's a plus. I think we did well for, the time period.
You'd think that, but it's very interesting how that goes. And this is going to be kind of the crux of where it's going to. Why did written language come after agriculture? What do you think?
Why did written language come after agriculture?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we had the technology to actually, write things because we weren't so busy actually trying to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. We weren't so busy trying to hunt and, we could actually, find other things to do with our time, including education and stuff like that. The economic response would be the specialization of labor became a thing.
Yeah.
So since not everybody had to farm, they can go off and do other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's essentially the crux of it is, I would just simplify it as free time.
Yeah,
you've created free
basically.
time. Yeah.
Yes.
And that didn't exist before then, or very little of it. Because
Correct.
you're either hunting or gathering or building or resting off from doing all of that labor, right? There wasn't times where you could just sit and write and think, right?
Generally. Well, you could
Yeah.
think on the farm, but you'd never write it down. You know, you're too
Yeah.
busy trying to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like thinking for thinking's sake, like we think about like philosophy or ethics or politics or things like that. Those are kind
Yes.
of like thinking for thinking's sake, right? It's not just, oh, what am I going to have for dinner today while you're working on the field, right? It's like,
Sure.
not that kind of thinking. And so this is kind of the crux of it, is what does free time do to humans, right?
Mhm.
And so we talk about this from the Genesis perspective, right? So this is kind of the beginning, because we can't really, there's nothing in Genesis talks about before that. Like you can talk about the Garden of Eden and all of that kind of stuff, but like
Mhm.
from at least technological perspective, we can't really go before that.
Sure.
Yeah. So after that, that went for a while, right? And looking at Genesis and looking at the early books of the Bible, most of them talk about things from the perspective of their versions of estate, right? They talk about their farmers and their employees and their shepherds. Like Abraham had a pretty big estate, so to speak, right? Not
Sure.
necessarily having a bunch of kids and stuff, but he was relatively wealthy, right?
Yes.
He had a lot of men under his belt. He had a couple women. He had lots of animals that are to his name and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's how society was mostly built on, was the old school patriarchy, right?
Right.
And so, and when you look at it that way, most of the Genesis stories are about patriarchal language, right?
Sure.
And it was based around the farm and the estate, which is interesting. And that's all the analogies that are used. And that's what all the stories focus on, is who's next in line, right?
Mhm.
That's the majority of, like, Jacob and Esau, even, you could even argue Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
All of it is about sons and succession, right? And it's all about keeping the estate, right?
Yes.
And Abraham screwed up when he would lie about who's his wife and who's not his wife, and trying to mingle with the wrong estates, right? That's where a lot of the stories come from, and a lot of the points of the stories was you were messing with that, which is actually the highest technology of the time. This is what mattered, right?
Yeah.
It's very interesting, right? And so that's where you get a lot of the patriarchal language and ideas and concepts are usually from the first couple books of the Bible, because that's what they had, right?
Sure.
It's very interesting. Well, I guess we'll bookmark that. How do you feel? Do you agree with that? Do you?
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of that was the nomadic culture. And yeah, it was all about, maintaining the bloodline. And, with the story of Abraham, of course, he was, called out and all these other types of things. So yeah, it was all about preserving the bloodline, the estate, yeah, all of it. So yeah, no disagreement with that.
Mm-hmm. All righty, sweet. So then we move on to good. We can start moving on to like the Iron Age, when we started using metal for everything, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because I think in Genesis they had coins and stuff, right? And they probably had very primitive swords, but it wasn't like a foundation as it was when it comes later on in the Bible, right? Of people having like actual armor and steel arrows and all of this kind of stuff, right? Or iron arrows or whatever metal came first.
Bronze.
Yeah. So you have like the Bronze and Iron Age and all those things, but we start getting into learning how to smith metals and how much that exponentially increased like all of the society, right?
Sure.
Because you can do a whole lot more with a metal sword than you can with a wood sword, right?
Sure. Or a wooden spear, as the case might be. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's also a pivotal theme in all that is you start talking about silver and gold a lot when you start getting later into the Old Testament. And most things, I think, are talking about precious metals, right? They're comparing things to silver and gold, like knowledge and wisdom and things like that. They talk a lot about accumulating wealth, like with Solomon, right?
Yeah.
He just got really rich and really wise and all of those kinds of things. And that was kind of the new big benchmark, right? And with that iron and stuff, it made stuff even more simple than basic stuff. So we even build even bigger towns and cities, right? And then that's when politics come in, right?
Well, I think there's always been politics. There's always been
Yeah.
the elders that came together. I mean, you see that with the story of Moses and his father-in-law coming to give him wisdom about how to rule the tribes, you know,
Mhm.
to divide them up and put counsel over them, and they would
Yeah.
report to him. So you see that a little before that. I think
Yeah.
they've always had elders, but yes, formal politics definitely comes into effect. You know, not long after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of politics of the idea of like kings and nations, right?
Yeah.
Where it's us versus them, big scale war instead of tribe fighting, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of that comes in because they made bigger cities and bigger populations, right? Which
Correct.
creates its own new problems and its own new issues, right? Of city living versus, you know, country or suburb living, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those tensions are super obvious throughout pretty much the rest of the Old Testament, I would say, is a lot of it is Israel versus them, Israel versus them, Israel versus them, right? Because now they have nations and kings and priests and prophets and all of these things. And they all have now like established roles outside of the patriarch just farming, right?
And keeping sheep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So shepherds were still important, but they weren't the big deal as they were before, where it wasn't like your main source of food and income, right?
Right.
And so when you start getting to those, then you start talking about way bigger scale things like entire nations and entire groups of people instead of that village versus that village, that town versus that town, right?
Right.
And that's when you start talking. And I think that's when they start talking way more about the world, right? Or at least the world they knew, which was, Europe, Europe and Middle East, right?
Middle East, yeah. It's mostly Babylon and probably up to about Turkey kind of thing, down to Egypt sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. And this might be a little side point. You might know more about it, but isn't like the whole Israel city on a hill thing similar to that? Where this is something weird I always forget. It's like they were supposed to be the city on the hill, and there's a couple verses that talk about like you're supposed to be nice to new people and feed them and help them, but also it's just nonstop war. So I never understood how those go together.
I mean, that's where the covenant would come in. And again, the reason the Jews had the covenant was to preserve the bloodline until the time of Christ. Mm-hmm. So there's all these other kind of pagan things taking place on the earth, and God basically set these people apart long enough and try to keep them from all of those practices long enough until Christ is born, until the appointed time. So he would literally say to them, you know, in order for them to survive, we need to wipe out this group of people, you know, the Hittites or whoever. And, you know, not only, you know, leave nothing alive, right? Because even the ancestors and so forth will come back and persecute them. So that explains a little bit of a lot of that kind of genocidal language, is that God is their protector. And he's not only protecting them from the people who are there presently, he's protecting them from threats that are going to come and wipe the bloodline out in the future. So that's why you see a lot of that type of language. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because it definitely gets more complicated because the old problems don't go away. They're just adding new ones, right?
Sure.
Because you still have to shepherd, you still have to farm, you still have domesticated animals, right?
Yeah.
You know, sheep and donkeys and, you know, goats are huge parts of a lot of the stories, right? In addition, and the analogies at the time. And so, and this is pretty interesting because during this time, there's still not a big split between mainstream culture and religious culture. They're still the same thing, right? Everything is still religious.
In Israel, anyway, in the biblical account. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the other nations also had their gods like Moloch and all that kind of stuff too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so there wasn't really a big difference between what we think of now as here's mainstream culture and here's church culture, right? They were the same thing.
I suppose. Right? I mean, it's hard to say because you look at the Babylonians, they had their religions and it was heavily integrated into the society, but they also had their Babylonian culture, right? So you get a lot of the epics of Gilgamesh and their writings and stuff like that. So it's not all religion. It would be like saying, you know, the Greeks, you know, as much as they had as much philosophy, that wasn't necessarily grounded in their, you know, various religion. They had Greek culture, right? They had their own sort of thing. But I agree, it's heavily influenced. Religion definitely played a major role.
Yeah.
It wasn't all consuming though.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because even a lot of their stories are based on their gods or their mythos legend heroes, right? That
Well,
are
the
like
ones we
kind of,
have,
yeah,
the
yeah,
ones that survived.
yeah. A lot of them got burned, but
Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of that's gone. Oh, the burning of Alexandria. We
yeah,
regret it
it's
to this
rough.
day.
Well, maybe you get to read it in heaven. Who knows?
maybe the library of
Or there's
Alexandria.
like an IMAX and you can just watch historical events, right?
Sure.
That'd be interesting. But yeah, so we go through all of that. I think the next pivotal point was not just nations, but the empire, right? Like the Roman Empire, where it's something even bigger and it's covering multiple nations, right? Multiple groups of people all in one place, right?
Sure.
And they invented tons of stuff, right? You're seeing, and this is going to be a theme, is technology always gets faster,
Sure.
right? And it's the same thing we were talking before. It's not because you're not removing old technologies, you're upgrading them, so to speak. A lot of the old ones are still there. Like even today, we still have farming and shepherding and domesticated animals and farms. They just look completely different. But we're doing all that and computers and airplanes and right,
Sure.
and big city metropolises. So technology always gets faster. It's like a compounding, right? Like compounding interest. When you put it in your bank account, you're just going to start getting big gains over time, right?
Sure.
Because 10% of $100 is a big difference than 10% of $1 million, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of the rule of technology, is it always kind of compounds interest itself, where it's going to keep making bigger and bigger gains because you're able to build off of everything you had before too, right? It's hard to produce, industry if all you have is still shepherds and farming and basic written language, right? You kind of needed all of the other things preceding it to actually get to that big, right?
Sure.
So we could probably skip a bit that just for brevity, because I could keep going about this and all of them. But I would say the next big one, and this is one Rollo hit on a lot, is the printing press.
Yeah,
right?
the Gutenberg printing press.
Yeah.
And the Gutenberg Bible, of course.
Yeah. And how much do you think the printing press changed religious and mainstream society? Because I think you're slowly starting to see the split, but not by much.
No, it is huge. Anybody who knows even just the basic history of the Bible, it was once upon a time the most forbidden book in the world. The powers that be did not particularly want the laity reading the Bible. And they went to great lengths to put it in a language that not everybody could understand, which was Latin. So it was kind of left up to the priests and other things like that. So the Gutenberg Bible, basically, I think it was translated into German first. And it was the first time that the everyday man could actually read the scriptures for themselves, right? And of course, this led to the Reformation. But yeah, it was a revolution at that point because, well, first of all, not everybody's literate. Not everybody could actually read. But for those who could, it became an incentive to read because now the dissemination of information was now available to the masses, right? So not only were Bibles printed, flyers, the first attempts at newspapers, political propaganda, all these different types of things now became part of like the modern ethos. So yeah, completely revolutionized. You could hear news stories about the empire, like what was going on hundreds of thousands of miles away for like the first time as, a farmer or something like that. So yeah, it was huge. It had massive impact. And we saw the fallout of that, at least in the religious aspect, with the Protestant Reformation. That's a very big part of what led to that was the Gutenberg Bible. So
people can read their own Bibles. Yeah.
They could read their own Bibles and realize, hey, this is what the priest said.
So what? Why am I paying for this guy in purgatory? What?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Where did that go?
Pretty much. Much.
And so that one's huge. And so small caveat on the Roman Empire and empires in general. That brought two big things, I think. One is infrastructure, right? They had roads, aqueducts. You were allowed to have a bigger population for longer before it collapses, right? Is essentially what happened there. And it also brought in diversity of cultures, right? Because before everybody kind of kept to themselves and most intermingling was taboo, right? Pre that. And now you kind of had to, because you had multiple groups and multiple religions and multiple ethnicities all living in the same place, right? So that's where you had a lot more about diversity in population and things like that, where we had to learn to intermingle with people that disagree with us and only sometimes try to kill each other instead of almost every time. Right. So you're having, even though everyone's roaming over the blanket, you still had people's individual identities, right? That now had to intermingle because you're all living in the same big city that now has infrastructure to make it last longer, right? And so that is now coming all up into the printing press. And just like you said, yeah, it extremely increased the literacy rates. It increased the amount of books people can read. It was definitely a technology of information, right?
Yes.
So now we just had a technology of how to make a giant society last a long time to, with diversity, to now more of them are now able to read and have books and make them mass printed, right?
Yeah.
And so it was essentially pre-internet, right? Because the internet and that is very similar. And Rollo talks about this in his book a lot and talks about it a lot too, right? Is essentially the printing press was like the first internet where it was able to just spread information to the masses, right? And once you do that, you're going to get a lot more fighting and you're going to get a lot more splits, because now that people are more educated and literate on those types of things, it's not just the elites or the special people. When the common people all have those and you start intermingling, and now there's information that could be good, that could be bad, right? You're talking about that a lot of propaganda was also made out of that. It wasn't just all nice, happy, good books, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to, not only do you have diversity of people now you have an extreme diversity of thought. So now you have diversity of people and diversity of thought in close proximity. And that's where you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff happen, right? There's obviously the biggest one that you said, Protestant cut off and split, and those little wars of burning each other and weird crap like that, but and just in general too, this is kind of the precursor to the Age of Enlightenment, right?
Yes.
We didn't really have the resources for people to actually do the scientific method until now, and that's where that starts coming in eventually. But that all comes from the Age of Enlightenment, where, wow, look how much information is actually out there. Now we're going to deep dive into it, right? And this is where you're going to start seeing the beginning of materialism, and not materialism necessarily just as I like to buy stuff, but the materialism is that the physical world is what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? And so we start studying things like gravity and all of those random parts of the physical world, right? And people are trying to figure out theories about pregnancy and germs and random crap like that, right? And then I think very soon after that is also guns, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is basically an advanced way of throwing rocks, but yes.
Yeah. high end full contact rocks. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. We've perfected throwing rocks, but yes.
All you got to do is this.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And so so that was a huge boom. I would arguably probably equal size of agriculture, right? Because agriculture completely changed the way we lived. This one also did. The other ones were kind of just building up to that, right? Incremental, big bomb, incremental, big bomb, right? But all of them still changed the world, right? And so it wasn't even just the religious culture from that technology of the change of Protestantism and like the lady now able to have a say in their faith kind of thing, but now it's also the mainstream culture of like Age of Enlightenment and new innovations and focusing now on education and literacy and technology and all of those kinds of things that lead to the Age of Enlightenment, right? So from there, what's the next big one? What do you think?
From the Age of Enlightenment to, is industrialization.
Oh yeah. Industrial society.
Yeah, exactly. So we went from agriculture to, manufacturing basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the printing press was a technology of information, right?
Yeah.
And the industry was a technology to make more technologies.
Well, it's a revolution in labor. Let's say that. It's sure.
Yeah, you can do everything even faster and more efficient and
cheaper.
Have more free time to do even more things.
Correct.
Right? And so it's literally a technology that helps create more technologies. right?
Sure.
So that's its end goal. And it was technology for technology's sake. And before it was technology for people's sake. Yeah, is how I would argue it. Because humans, and this is what we'll eventually get to, is I don't think humans benefit from industrial society. I think technology benefits from industrial society.
Okay.
Right? Because I think it's pretty easy. Like you can look at statistics, you can look at history from there. Most humans' lives are getting worse, not better since then. You talk about factory jobs and locations and things like that. You can talk about mental health. We could talk about physical health. We could talk about all of it, but all of it over time is actually getting worse since industrial society. And we'll get to that. But
Okay.
yeah. And how do you think industrial society affected mainstream culture, but also religious culture?
How did it affect mainstream culture? Well, I mean, the big transition at that point was people were leaving the farms to go and work in basically what were sweatshops. And people don't understand the sweatshops. The fact was, even though it was bad working conditions, it was actually probably safer than working on the farm, right? A very big reason our ancestors had the big families that they did was because many of the kids were probably not going to survive, just living on the farm. So the big cultural shift was to the urban centers where the factories were. So for the first time, you were meeting different cultures and you were kind of living in close proximity. And, you were making probably more money than your family had ever seen. So it was like the advent of a middle class. So yeah, there was huge socio-economic changes that took place as a result of that. And land lost value. So once upon a time, having a huge farm or a huge estate was the show of wealth. A person could build a factory on a much smaller piece of land, and that would be worth a lot more. So, of course, the likes of Henry Ford and these other ones. For the church, that's an interesting question. What did industrialization do for the church? Well, it freed them up to do a lot of missionary work. I'll definitely say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say missionaries probably went out. A big part of the 1800s to 1900s was probably the big push of Christianization. So I would say that was probably the biggest impact. But for the most part, I don't think there was a cultural shift in the church for the most part. At least I can't think of any. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it because it's not just information, but one of the big parts of industrial society is transportation. Right?
Yeah, travel. Yeah,
it's way easier now to go across the sea or across the land on a train or a good boat, instead of rowing and hope you survive and brought enough food, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so the implement of like steam engines and the implement of all of those types of things that like helped our transportation go. I call that technology's gain of function, right?
Sure.
It's a very
it's not to say that they couldn't do it before because they had sails, they had boats and stuff. But yes,
it was
speed.
It was a heavy investment, right?
Yeah,
and now
agree.
It's buy a plane ticket, or buy a train ticket, right?
Yeah.
It's you're completely separated from the process of actually having to plan the journey, right?
Sure.
You just sit, you just sit in the wagon or the car and the train, and you get there eventually, right?
Sure.
Pretty much out of your hands. And so, so that caused a lot of the spreading, right? But that also caused a lot of the, I would say, the tensions in diversity as well, right? If we're spreading everything, then it's also interacting with everything more, right? And I think this is also where you get a lot more of the, because it was always there, but it's a lot more severe now if you get the East versus West, right?
Right.
Mentalities. And that's because we were able to spread deeper into each other's territory, so to speak.
I understand the point. I don't think that's actually what happened, though, because even though, conflict as a whole has kind of been decreasing, worldwide for the most part. So as much as we might have fundamental disagreements, the actual number of conflicts, like physical, conflict, I think that's been on the decline. So I'm not too sure if that's yay or nay on that.
Well, we had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. None of those. But I don't think any of those would have happened without the Industrial Revolution, right?
No, I disagree. I think we had wars long before that. The Romans conquered the most part of Europe, right? thousands, well, I don't know if millions died. Genghis Khan came in and, I mean, basically rebuilt the walls of Persia with the skulls of the enemies. It's not the only reason why people like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's just the scale because of the technology is bigger.
Yeah.
But actual conflicts has been on the decline. Like, we don't have, those types of skirmishes anymore, sort of thing.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, and we'll get to that.
I agree. I don't know if it's necessarily good or bad, but I don't think just because you expand or reach into different cultures equates that there's more conflict. I don't think those.
Yeah, but I'm saying the conflicts we did have were much more devastating.
Yes,
you have bigger populations with deadlier weapons.
Yeah, and I think it's the technology that did that. I don't know if necessarily. If the Romans had it, they probably would have done the same thing. That's kind of my point. I don't think the carnage would have been on any different level.
Yeah, but the fact that the technology allowed us to do it.
I
think Red Crusader put it good, amplified it, pretty severely. The blood, and that also made people more hesitant to fight it too, because they knew the cost was way more dire. Right, you're gonna have bombs, and you're gonna have guns and cannons and bloodshed. Right.
Well, I mean, that's Alfred.
Yeah.
Alfred Nobel, who invented dynamite, and he basically said that he thought it was going to be a weapon of peace, because what person is going to throw, people into this like exploding landmines and other things like that? So he actually thought the deadlier the weapons, the more likely it was going to lead to peace. He was fucking wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's wrong to a point. Eventually, we got to the Cold War, and everybody just had a nuclear.
All right. Well, that's mutually assured destruction is what kind of sealed the fate of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's not forget the Americas did use the nuclear weapons, right? So
the only ones, one for one, one for one
so far.
Yeah. But I mean, it is kind of true though, that now that our weapons are literally, push a button, destroy an entire city of millions of people, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot less of that happening now because people are scared of the ramifications of that, right? Because it's going to happen back to them.
We're in like 4th generation and 5th generation war, which is more propaganda. It's more civil. It's on a smaller scale. You don't really see countries invading countries anymore, really.
Yeah,
democracies generally don't attack each other. You need a dictatorship, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and most of that spreads through the technology of information and the diversity of people and thought, right? That's a lot of where the war is waging still.
Yeah.
What's that old thing? I think it was a Chateau Hartis thing, but he said diversity plus proximity equals war, kind of thing. Yeah. And thanks, Romans. But but yeah, so like I think technology heavily influences like every facet of our lives, right? From the beginning onward. There's so many global changes, both in religious thought and, just human progress in general, that we can't get away from it now. And this is a term called technological slavery from a guy that we're not allowed to mention.
Yes.
He rhymes with Schmed, Uncle Schmed.
Uncle Schmed.
But it's essentially, once you adopt a technology, you can't really go back unless it's forced upon you, like some kind of major disaster or overthrowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the best examples of that right now that we have is cars, right? So before cars, most towns were relatively close together, relatively small. The roads for walking, right? Or horses, you know what I mean? But once we developed the car and we were able to make it mass produced and that most people have cars, now all roads are longer, more places are spread apart, right? Most cities. So before, 20 miles was your day. And now 20 miles is hey, I think I'm going to go to that nice restaurant. Right.
Yeah.
And so now you actually can't function without a car or without transportation once we invented it. And that's the concept of technological slavery, is that once we go somewhere, we can't go back. Right.
Sure.
Spare some doomsday thing happens or some overthrowing happens. Right.
I mean, you could always go off into the woods and,
live
that kind of life. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. Most people will not do that, but that is an option. We can't say it's not.
But why won't we? Because we're addicted to the technology we already have, right?
Sure.
It's there's a term for it. I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head. What's it called? Lifestyle creep. It's very similar to lifestyle creep. Sure. It's a different word, but that is like, let's say, you get minimum wage, you're making $20,000 a year. And then so you're used to living poor, and then you get a raise and now you make 30,000 a year. Instead of saving that money, you're probably going to upgrade your lifestyle, right?
Correct.
You're going to buy slightly nicer things. You're going to get slightly more things. You might get a slightly bigger apartment or house. And then you start making 50,000 a year, and then you slowly upgrade. But then let's say that job, there's some job crisis and you get fired or something, and you're back to zero. And now you have to get a job that's 25,000, but you already knew how to live in 20,000, but it doesn't matter. Your life is now, your brain is solely based on that. It's that, but on a societal level. Right.
Sure. I get that.
So the reason most people can't just go live in the woods and start over is because they've already lifestyle creeped to the level of our age of technology. Right.
Sure.
And so that's where the term technological slavery comes from, is because you can't go backwards. It's literally an addiction. Right. Because you've had it in your life so long that it's very hard to cut it off, just like it is to try to quit drinking or quit drugs that you've been addicted to. Right. We don't have a lot of technological rehabs because everybody's on it.
I don't know if that's an
Does that make
addiction.
sense?
Yeah, I get the point. I don't know if I can't say that driving a car is an addiction. You know, I drove for 20 years. I mean, I drove for 20 years. I've been out here for 5 years and I've never driven a car here. So
yeah, but you use transportation.
Yeah, well, I'll use the trains and other things. So, but I mean, the luxury of having a car, being able to jump in it, go where I want, whenever I want. I can't say that's an addiction. Yeah. But I understand the premise that it definitely eases your life at the end of the day. And I am considering a car because the transportation out here sucks. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
if I lived in London, I probably wouldn't bother. But yes, yeah. I don't know if addiction is the right word, but it's definitely cushioned things to where people would be preferential to keep it rather than not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does go through your dopamine receptors and all of those types of things. Your brain is also based on goal setting. Like it's not always necessarily food or drink or things that hit dopamine. Even activities can hit dopamine, right? And one of those things is the addiction's based on a cycle of patterns, right?
Right.
Where you have a craving to want to do something, you have triggers in your brain that bring you up to that, and then you do it, and then you get a hit from it, right?
Right.
And most technology is actually that way because, like we talked about at the beginning, our bodies and our brains are the same as they were 200,000 years ago. And this is where a lot of and then once technology came in and created that societal lifestyle creep, you got to realize we weren't made for everything to be easy and pushes of buttons or tapping your toe, and now you just went 50 miles in less than an hour, right? We're not built for that, right? And so when you start doing all those things, most addictions are just extreme forms of natural things, right?
Right.
And that's essentially what all technology is as well. It's extreme easiness that's not necessarily supposed to be there, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess I get the point.
Yeah. And so when we're getting to where we are now, it is the slavery aspect in that we can't go back, right? And now, and this is why I think industrial society is hit on so much by, Uncle and other people, is because that's the first technology that wasn't for us.
Right.
The technology was for technology.
Well, I mean, we're not in the industrial era anymore.
Yeah, we're past that. We're way past that.
Yeah,
we're talking about robots and AI now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're in like the information or the intelligence age.
Yeah. The internet is like the printing press. It's another technology information.
Yes, the information age.
Yeah, but it's not always necessarily for us. We're the resources now. We're not the point anymore.
Sure.
Because if you think about all of the tracking computers online that take up people's data from Facebook and all of those things, the reason Facebook exists isn't for you to be happy and post your photos of your dog. It's now there to collect information, right?
Sure.
You are the resource now. You're not the point of the technology anymore. You're a battery for it, so to speak. So that's what I'm saying. Technology now is for technology's sake and not ours.
I mean, that could be said for social media, but I don't think all like the research they're doing for like fusion power, that's not for the sake of fusion power. That's, that's obviously trying. So yes, there are technologies where we are being harvested, which comes back to social media, but that's not the sum of all technology.
Is it though? I think it is. I think you could argue it is.
I disagree. I don't
we're
think
talking
so at
about
all.
transportation is gain of function for more technology, right?
Right.
And we're talking about gain of function. That's obviously popular in the media right now because we're talking about it from Corona stuff, right?
Sure.
And implementing. And our creation of trains, planes, and automobiles is gain of function for more technology to be spread. So it's not.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not.
We're using it, but it's not for us. Does that make sense?
I mean, you don't design a new car just for the sake of designing a new car. You are designing it for a market for people who want the new car. So electric cars is an example of that, right? So you have a piece of the market that doesn't believe in fossil fuels, whatever, environmental green huggies. You can't say that that's not beneficial to people. That was made for people. So I still think there are aspects to our technology. Yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, you're serving people to some capacity. Even Facebook, as much as, yes, it's harvesting the mass amounts of data, it's still a communication medium that most people are using to communicate with their family. I mean, we communicate for Religion Zero on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, they're harvesting the data, but we do get function out of it. We do get something from it.
Yeah. But I would argue it's similar to how a domesticated dog gets food for being happy, like and hanging out with its owner. But the owner is the big deal. We're the dog now.
Okay.
We're no longer the owner. We're not the prime of the house.
But I mean, you could say that about any technology. You can say that about
all technology. That's what I'm saying.
Are we the dog? Are we just? I'll have to think about that one. That one, yeah. I'm not entirely sure that makes sense, but cool. It's a perspective.
Yeah, but I mean, and like most of our biggest thoughts right now or studies is trying to think about consciousness and AI, right?
Right.
That's literally creating a new species, right?
Sure. I have my concerns with AI as well.
Yeah, but how we got there is because we've been using cars and Facebook, right?
Right.
So we're actually the ones that are seeding the new life that will most likely be way smarter than us and take over that. So I'm saying we're already the dog and we don't know it yet.
Okay.
Most people are like, oh, if we have AI controlling the world, then yeah, we'll be the dog. But no, I'm saying it's been that way for hundreds of years. We've already started that path. And it always exponentially grows, right? So it's inevitable. And I think it's already happened. And I think industrial society I think all technology is getting us there, but industrial society was the first big technology for technology's sake. That's what I'm saying.
Right. I don't know. I mean, because I don't necessarily think that's entirely accurate. Some technologies, yeah, definitely. But I think all of the industrial revolution technologies was there to try, at least originally, to try and improve the lifestyle of people. And that's why I brought up the sweatshops. The sweatshops were shitty conditions, but it was a better life alternative than dying on the farm. So even though you could say it's like meat for the grinder and, everybody's doing a monotonous job and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah.
They made a much better lifestyle by taking that shitty, sweatshop job, but they did it by choice.
Yeah. So but I mean, is it really a better life though? That's what I'm saying. And how much of society was now based around the factory instead of based on the human?
They obviously thought it was a better life. Otherwise they could have stayed on the farm.
Yeah. But people that live in opiate dens,
opium dens.
Yeah. Opium dens. They also think that's a better life, right? But is it?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, somebody's spaced out on drugs and they think, they're God and they're flying on dragons and stuff. I don't know if that's a better life or not.
Yeah.
And that's a philosophical question about consciousness, but
yeah. And I think a lot of this is a lot more similar to Brave New World than it is 1984, right?
Okay.
So 1984 is the totalitarian do what else or we'll kill you.
Right.
We still have some of that in society a little bit, but it's not to the extreme degree of the book. But I think Brave New World is pretty damn spot on.
What is Brave New World? I'm not
so
sure
Brave New World is similar to 1984, but it's a different way to control society. And it's just make everyone happy and simplify everyone's choices, and then they'll just do whatever you want.
Yeah, you were telling me about that, and I haven't seen it, but I haven't read the book. So okay.
Yeah. And so if it's pretty much WALL-E. Have you seen WALL-E? where
Yeah, I've
everybody's
seen
just
Wall-E.
fat and happy in chairs and get free food and just stare at a TV all day, right? That is still, producing a function. Like that's the end goal here, is that we are now the batteries and consumers doing the basic things that the machine needs to function.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense? And our technologies now are not for our benefit. It's for the system's benefit. And they just find ways to make us happy so we don't revolt.
Yeah, but if there wasn't a benefit to us, we wouldn't use it. And,
Is there a benefit to eating chocolate cake?
Yeah, it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes good. But what does it actually do to you?
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there are no consequences to those choices, but it's a free choice to hit some kind of pleasure center of the brain that, that's why you eat it.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's arguably not a free choice, right?
I would disagree. It is a free choice. Doesn't mean it's consequence free.
Yeah.
I make the choice not to eat chocolate cake every day, right? So
yeah. But I'm saying, let's say every single meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, for the rest of your life, you're always going to have 2 plates in front of you. One's cake and one's salad.
Right.
How often are you going to pick salad? Very not very likely, right?
Right. But I mean, those are the
choices we're making. Yeah, but that's the choices we're making every day.
We're making the choice between 2 plates of what?
No, I'm just saying we're going to do the thing that gives us the neurochemical transmitters of feel good versus the things we know that are actually beneficial to us.
Sure.
And we make those choices every day. And which ones do we always pick? We always pick the ones that feel good.
Yeah, we're driven by 2 factors: pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Right. So pain and pleasure, like the big centers. And of course, we're always going to side with the pleasure center over the avoidance, and avoid pain. That doesn't mean the choice isn't free.
Yeah, but the problem is this is something we talk about in like addiction classes a lot, is that willpower isn't what we think it is.
Sure.
It's essentially, you can only say no to so many things in a day, right?
Okay.
You can't just like have perfect willpower and always make the right choice. It's like clinically impossible.
Sure.
So if you're the average person could say no to bad things 10 times a day, but we're in a society that creates 2,000 choices a day. Is it really free will? You're always you're always going to lose.
Yeah, but we don't live in that society. We're making
every advertisement, every commercial, everything we look at essentially has those types of choices in it. Because like our food industry alone is based on your craving centers, and they have the perfect amount of bliss point of how much sugar can we put into this so that it's more addictive, but not so much that it's actually grossly sweet.
Yeah, but you see,
they go through that process in every food we have.
I get it, but by that logic, you're implying like everybody's a slave to McDonald's. Like everybody is going to eat McDonald's because of their marketing, which is not true, right?
No, we're all going to eat bad processed food, though, right?
You guys have vegans who make a conscious decision not to partake in that kind of culture, as much as they're bombarded with it all the time. I mean, they have their own bombardments.
Yeah. It's all bombardments, though.
Yeah, but then you have people who just don't watch it, right? I mean, out here in the UK, for instance, if you don't have a license, you don't watch live TV. I don't ever see advertisements for food or anything like that. Yeah. I watch YouTube, right? So
yeah,
I understand the point of programming and the mass marketing and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that you don't have a free choice. It could be a heavily influenced choice, but it doesn't mean you don't have a free will choice.
Yeah, but you have a free will choice each individual time, but you can only say no so many times, right?
Right. Be that as it may, but
it's like
say no every
let's say you're gluten sensitive and you're trying to be low carb and lose weight, but you live in a donut factory. How well is that going to go for you, right?
I mean, that's an extremist kind of absurdist position, but
is that our real life though? How many choices are you picked every day that's the bad choice versus the good choice that's long term?
I'm on a carnivore diet. I've been on it for 4 years. Right. I mean, just around the corner from me is, a massive bakery, and I smell the bread every day.
Yeah.
All these different types of things. And all right, I've decided I'm going to have like one cheat meal a week, which is a pizza, thin crust. And I've been maintaining that for months.
Yeah.
Even though I live around all of this time, there are 2 massive billboards outside my window with like Big Macs and cake and all kinds of crap. I still have a choice. I'm still empowered to say no, and I've already done that.
Yeah, I don't know if you're getting what I'm talking about though, because I think the problem here is scale, because it's not just food. It's, am I going to watch Netflix, or am I going to go for a walk around outside or go gardening? Am I going to do
Right.
this, or am I going to do that? Am I going to walk to the store? Or am I going to drive or Uber there? Every single
Right.
one of those choices is one of those. It's not just food when you walk by the bakery. It's
Sure.
every facet of your life is that. And our current society and technology allows that to happen, that every turn and look you at, they're optioning another option for you to be fat and happy instead of like long-term healthy, satisfied.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's everywhere all of the time. People are always going to break.
Okay, but they still have a free choice. It's not automatic. They're not slaves to the marketing. They could be influenced by the marketing, but even in all those times, they could eventually say no. So even if they get into the habit of using Uber every single day for the rest of their life, or for how many ever years, they can still make the choice at some point and be like, "No, I'm taking the bike, or I'm walking, or whatever the case might be." I'm not following into like the idea of lack of free will or like societal programming to the point where you can't make a free choice. I'm not seeing the connection.
Well, no, yeah, because I'm trying to talk about this, but it's from a technological scale, right?
Right.
Would you agree? Absolutely, no social media is the best thing.
Probably, yes.
Okay, are we still using it every day?
Yes.
Okay, so we're constantly failing that yes, no.
If I did not have the podcast and this show, I wouldn't be on social media.
Yeah. But
right?
we still are.
We are. And I the minute if this and the podcast I do stops, I will be off Facebook. I will be off everything.
Yeah.
But it serves the function of, promoting the shows and other things and communicating and stuff like that. That's the only reason I'm still on Facebook. I barely post anything but shit on my Facebook. So
yeah. But but you could use that decision though for literally every part of our lives. Our whole lives are tailored around that.
Yeah, but that's a free choice.
This choice, that choice. But it's a choice we knowingly know is hurting us, but we're taking it anyway because of feel goods. Right?
I don't think I don't think having a Facebook to communicate with you for Religion Zero is hurting me. Because I don't use any other function on Facebook, so it's not hurting me.
I know, but I think I'm talking about. I think we're getting the problem here of scale, right?
Right.
I'm talking about society is based around that from all people, right?
Right. I'm not seeing it. I'm not. While I agree that
why is McDonald's $1 billion company?
Because they make very cheap food.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter that you don't eat at McDonald's. It matters that people eat at McDonald's.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and they existed long before Facebook and social media. So they were billions of burgers right out the gate because they, efficiency. They basically took the Henry Ford model and made it mainstream for food.
Yeah.
That's
fine. We would agree it's a net negative on your health unless you're literally eating salads and plain burgers with nothing on it, which nobody is doing at McDonald's. They didn't get famous for selling billions of salads, right?
Well, again, I think you're playing a zero-sum game. You're playing it like, if something isn't good, it's automatically bad, and I don't think that's how the world works. So a marathon runner goes into McDonald's and eats like a Big Mac with fries and stuff. That's probably very good for him. That's actually like a plus. Not everybody goes into McDonald's and eats a burger. That's necessarily a bad. I go into McDonald's.
But is it the vast majority? How many marathon runners?
No, I agree. I agree. It's not the vast majority. But that's where I'm at. I'm not an all or nothing zero-sum game person. I know there's nuance to all of those situations. And I agree, society's massively influenced by marketing, social media, and all these different types of things. But even with that influence, the ultimate choice is still free, even though it might be heavily weighted in some direction or another. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah. But if it's heavily weighted to one direction for billions of people and they're all picking that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fine. I get that. It doesn't mean that they're basically obedient slaves. It just means they've made a choice based on the information that they had.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just have to agree to disagree because I feel like I feel like I'm clear, but I might not be clear. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
But
it's
it's
nuanced, I
just
suppose.
the reason Facebook's $1 billion company, the reason McDonald's $1 billion company, the reason Walmart's $1 billion company, even though everybody knows the net negatives, right? We're doing it because it's easier and it feels good and it just gets us through the day, even though we
Yeah.
know it is a net negative on our life, but we will still continue to make those decisions.
But it's not a net negative all the time. If it is, I didn't have to promote the podcast and talk to you about this show and which I enjoy doing, and we get to share our views. Those are positives. And I think we do a good job with the show. So even though I don't engage in any of the other functions on Facebook, except to shitpost memes that I get off Reddit, it's just to communicate with you and share the 10K Run podcast. It's a net positive. So this is where
I don't think it is though. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think it's more nuanced than that. I don't see it as black and white as that. I think it's the marathon.
How many people using
runner.
the internet have a podcast to spread information?
Oh, there are thousands of podcasts, and it's not helping.
Out of billions of people on the internet, though, that's a big discrepancy.
Then you got the worker in India whose basically job is to like as many Facebook pages or they can, and they're earning a living off of that. I can't necessarily say that they doing that is a net negative, and I think that's the difference. I think you're taking a hardline position, be like all social media is bad, using it is bad. I'm saying no, that can't be true. There are nuanced positions. While that might be true for the majority, and we'd probably agree on that, I'm not doing a zero-sum game like it's automatically all negative, because that's obviously not true.
Yeah, but we agree it's for our detriment, though. We already agreed on that.
Yeah, I think society as a whole will suffer.
That's what I'm saying.
But but on an individual level, I can weigh the pros and cons and make a decision for myself. So Facebook's, I don't give a shit about Facebook. Facebook doesn't do anything to me. I can't wait to get rid of it. Right. But yeah, I if you want to talk, that's the scale argument. Yeah, for the majority of people, that's the case. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. It's not automatically all negative.
Okay. Let me give one more example of that, and then we'll open it to Q&A and see if we can get people in. But cool. Going back to the car and technological slavery, because maybe this will help with the point more. Not only did it change society of like how far you have to drive and now you need a car, but now that you need a car, now you're moving less and now you're eating more, because now you can eat in your car on the go and you're not walking and you're not that, right?
How if you don't have a car, how do you get around?
You use other people's car or public transportation. It's all the same thing. You're sitting down and moving 100 miles an hour.
Or walk. What do you think I do?
Yeah, but what do you think society does? They don't walk.
Yeah, I again, that's the mass, but you're making it sound like walking is not an option. No, of course it is.
Yeah, but nobody takes it. That's what I'm saying.
No, that's clearly not true, because out here in the UK, it's not only walking but cycling. Right? I mean, we have whole lanes of the highways and stuff like that, where a very large, not the majority, but a large number of people are taking up cycling. So again, I agree with it in principle, but you're kind of missing some of the nuance in that position, that some people do make healthy choices.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's the scale thing, because I'm talking about societal. You can't walk everywhere. Like I can't walk to my job 23 miles away.
No, I'm not.
It's impossible. Like I could, but it's going to take 12 hours, right?
You could cycle to your job probably.
Yeah, but it would still take 5 or 6 hours. And I personally can't ride a bike because I don't have cartilage in my knees. But
okay, fair enough.
I lost that when I was like 18 or 19. But
I just had the craziest moment of deja vu. I've actually heard you say that cartilage thing at this very moment. But yeah. No, I as a society, yes, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that people don't have options. They can make better choices, and people do. Not everyone, some people. But as I say, I don't think automatically not having a car equals you don't move enough. I think it's the opposite. Me not having a car, I'm forced to walk to everything around here. So I'm walking a lot more than I probably would have if I had.
But are you walking to London when you got to go?
No, obviously I can't walk to London. I mean, I could. Physically, it's possible.
Yeah, but it's such an unlikely choice. No one picks it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it would take me like, I don't know.
It's the cake to salad thing. Almost everyone will pick cake over salad, right?
Right. And I'm not taking a car.
You can call it free will, but everyone's still going to pick cake, or most people.
Most people will, and there'll always be exceptions. So it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
That people will always choose the lesser of two evils, or, the easier choice.
Yeah. But the thing is that you have that choice in every aspect of your life, right?
Sure.
Not just transportation, not just food. It's how you use your free time, where you work at, all of this stuff. People are in mass are going to pick the easier option.
Sure. And picking the easier option is not always a bad thing.
Oh, it's always the bad thing. That's what I want to get to.
That's what I disagree with. It's not always a bad thing.
Okay,
me being able to get to London and come back on the train within one day and get back here for a business meeting where I could help the homeless and get this business discussion done, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me say it this way. So we're coming back way to one of the beginning topics, talking about the concept of free time, right?
Right.
When you do something easy, you have free time, right?
Not necessarily.
Unless you're doing only easy things to mass scale. So if you don't have to go hunt your food and you can go to the grocery store, you've created free time, right?
Right.
That's the essence of free time. Is times you don't need to survive, right?
Right. But I mean, doing something easy does not automatically mean you have free time. You can go to the movies, which is easy, and waste 2 hours. It doesn't necessarily give you.
Yeah, but that was all free time. It was irrelevant to your.
Yeah, but you chose to use that time for something that's easy.
Yeah, but I'm talking about easy and free time, as in we don't have to go get food and water or build a house or we die. That's the essence of free time. Okay. Free time is optional time, and anything that isn't based on your survival is now optional, right?
Okay.
That's usually where I talk about free time from, and the people who talk about this kind of philosophy.
No. The statement you made was anytime you choose something easy, it means you have free time, and I'm saying no. That's
creates free time,
and I'm saying no. That's not true. I can choose to go to the cinema, which is easy. And I don't have free time because I'm watching the movie for 2.5 hours. So your premise is false.
No. Maybe you just misspoke. But it's
okay.
Free time is based on doing the easier thing, right?
Right. So So the statement you made about doing something easy automatically means you have free time. I think that's wrong. So yeah, okay.
Well,
you can take it from.
You can just interchange like labor with hard, right?
Right.
There's a laborious way to do something, walk to work versus drive to work, which is the easy way, right? And you've created free time because you use the technology to do it easier.
Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes
what
sense.
happens in free time is your brain freaks the fuck out, but we're so used to it, we don't think about it.
Okay.
Our brains, going back to the whole 200,000, we had 195,000 years of no technology to 5,000 years of omega technology, exponential growth. We're still the 200,000-year-old human, right? And Red Crusader joined. We'll get to you in a second. Let me just finish this point. We'll get you in. So we're still built on that, right? And I call it, we are polar bears in the jungle exhibit. We have so many resources to our thing, but we're built for the Arctic, so to speak. Right. We're meant to do long jaunts, trying to find stuff, trying to do stuff, just build, just to maintain. And that's how our biology is the most efficient for. But when you put the polar bear in the jungle exhibit, it gets sick and mentally ill and dies because there's too many resources and it has no reason to work.
Right. Yeah.
And that comes from abundant resources, which also comes from technological easy buttons.
Right.
So technological easy buttons are creating damage to humans.
In some cases, sure.
But in all cases, right? We can't, we're not going to evolve to be in this society in 5,000 years. That's not how it works, right?
I would say the diabetic who requires insulin, who hits the easy button to survive, might disagree with you. That is damaging.
Yeah, but did diabetes exist pre-agriculture?
Obviously, I agree. That's a problem.
That's a civilization disease.
Things. Yeah, sure. I get that, but in those circumstances, you can't necessarily say that that easy button is doing damage. That easy button is actually keeping them alive.
But that easy button was only created because we created the technology for people to get diabetes.
Doesn't matter. I mean, we could go all the way back and be like, well, it all happened because Adam and Eve ate the apple. If you want to play that game of like who's to blame. Granted, there are people in our society who would not survive in the Roman Empire, right? They would die off. Granted, but people, the weak and the suffering and so forth, they probably like the fact that they're alive based on the easy button.
Yeah,
just
I
saying.
Would say the problem was created by society and technology, right?
I mean, if it's a genetic problem, I can't necessarily say that's the case. We don't know.
Yeah, but I don't think they had genetic diabetes back then. It's interesting. We'll have to go into the science of it later, but we'll bring in good old Red. What's up, Red?
What's
Howdy.
going on, bro?
So let's see if I can try to connect this dissection that you guys have going on here. So
Go for it.
I'd say I lean a little bit more on Conk's side on things, but I see where Brooks coming from.
Mm-hmm.
See, now what Brooks trying to do is say there are, I guess, bigger exceptions to the whole of what you're saying, because I do agree that, I kept saying in the chat, we are organic machines to some point that, use chemical reinforcement to get what we want, right? Yeah, that's how we learn. If there wasn't any stimuli, then we wouldn't have a reason to do whatever the hell that we're doing in the first place. But let me think about this. So, because it was a lot to absorb. Over time, technology, we as humans, we're not, I guess, evolutionarily, we're not adapted to handle that as fast, especially since the Industrial Revolution. We weren't able genetically to keep up with the amount of information and technology that was flooding us. And over time, what that does is, I guess, it gives us way too many options past what our genetic knowledge or whatever can handle. So, there is plenty of opportunity to say yes to bad things. Plenty of diversity, because with your whole salad to cake thing, I mean, yeah, I do have better willpower to say, I want a salad, but every great once in a while, there's maybe 20 different guys that have a salad product and, 40 different guys that have a cake product. And somewhere in the footfall, there's more people that have that cake product because it sells easier. Mm-hmm. And that gives you more opportunity to say yes to a potentially bad product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very similar to microtransactions and loot boxes and gambling in video games, right? They found out that if you get out a free game that has a shit ton of microtransactions, you actually make more money than just charging them $50 once. And it's because they're willing to fuck with your neurotransmitters and your chemicals in your brain to want to keep pressing that loot box gamble button, and you'll spend way more money than your $50 original investment. Right?
But now on Brooks' side, this is where we go to Brooks' side.
Yeah.
Now, there is that there, but if you have the willpower to say no, for the most part, you can do that. But if you say yes, once in every great once in a while, and you have one piece of cake, it isn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you're coming from, Brooke.
Pretty much.
We do, yeah.
It's not everything you might perceive as a bad choice is not obviously a bad choice. It depends on the circumstances and the person. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah. And, I do agree with that, but, Conk's going on, how many people actually do have that much willpower? There's 60 million people everywhere in the world. How many of those people are making very conscious and, I'm going to say no to this?
Not very many.
No, but
yeah, that's why they're billion-dollar companies, right?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. Well, you can't be a billion-dollar company if no one buys your stuff, right?
True.
Yeah.
But you don't need a majority of people to buy your stuff to be a billion-dollar company, right? You can get that with 2% of the world's population, right? That doesn't mean that the vast majority are doing that. Is kind of the point. We honestly don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if that helped. I don't know if that helped. You guys, it seemed like you were very, hitting the wall with each other.
Yeah,
but
I still think it's a matter of scale, because I understand the individual argument, right? You could say no to so many things, but I mean, it goes to the scale of yes, you have that cake or salad answer, and you could say no to one or the other. But I'm saying, throughout your day and how society is developed now with the technology we have, you're making that decision 1,000 times a day. You're not going to say no every
1,000+.
time. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
not going to say no every
Yeah.
time. And nobody says no every time. And it might be diverse different things. Like you're a vegan, you're able to skew away from McDonald's, but you also might be binge watching soap operas, right? And so,
or at the very base level, like I was saying in the chat, I mean, even, you know, if you are vegan only product, I know plenty of like horrible vegan products.
mhm.
You know, good vegan products and bad vegan products that, you know, they use to advertise on you every day. It's
I mean,
I don't know.
that was the point
Go
I was
ahead.
making, that it's not
Yeah.
as clear cut to say that every person who chooses the cake is necessarily making a bad choice. And just like
Yeah.
every person who's choosing the good vegan is not necessarily making a good choice. And I think that is where there's more nuance to saying, oh, well, not every technological choice we've made is necessarily bad. That's again the nuance that we're making.
It's a very gradient situation.
Correct.
For sure. Like, you know, where's your balance? I mean, you know, because we at our very base level, we like to think black and white, but we've only, I guess, muddied the waters even more with our choice of diversity.
Yeah, I mean, that's the postmodernist argument. So that's the discussion we had before.
I would still argue, though, that like with technology, it is the baby in the bathwater. You can't really separate them. You can't only have good technology. All of it's going to come from all of it, right? You couldn't create the printing press and only make books you like. Everyone's going to make every kind of book, right?
Yeah, but not everybody's going to read every type of book.
Yeah, but they're going to read enough that it's going to perpetuate the technology, right? You can't only make medicine very specifically for what you want. They're also going to make really bad drugs, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean the technology is bad. That just means the choices that the people who did it were shitty, right?
Yeah, but this also goes into a whole other thing about the technological slavery and the concept of a crutch, because we didn't even get to that, but that's another hour discussion. But humans are go ahead.
The only thing that you can do is have your own mindset and be yourself and use that to the world instead of the world using you for their ideas. You know, you have to come from you. You can't let other people program you. You have to program yourself.
Yeah. I don't know, because I would argue against that too, but that would take another hour. But
you're living in a very dark world, punk.
No, it's just I'm just saying most people don't understand how deep technology runs, right? It's not just cars, it's not just internet, it's not just books. Like it changes the fundamental level of how humans think and talk and interact, and almost all of it goes to negative physical and mental health, because we weren't built for it. We were built to run around outside and chase deer, right? And so getting into the point by point thing of that would take a couple more hours. So I was trying to do cliff notes here, but because it's only a 90-minute show, but
an hour and 22 minutes later.
Yeah,
clearly.
The most of this was also introductory stuff. We would have to go more into the actual nitty-gritty if you want, but but this is just something I wanted to bring up to people because we didn't even get so far into the religion part of how that affects our religion and also our science and our psychology and all those types of things. We didn't even get into that part. We were just talking about how technology got us here and if it's good, right? So it's a very deep concept and it would definitely take way more. Maybe I'll do some solo shows and maybe try to hit some points that I didn't get to here yet. So we'll see. But you got anything else, Red?
I guess the one thing I'd say as a possible solution to all this is learning how to shut off one faucet and open up another. Just kind of, shutting yourself off from technology, maybe for like a 2-week fast or something, and focusing on something else. And then shutting that back off and coming back on. It really kind of, closes your mind off to that constant stimuli of that thing that you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I guess it forms like a new stimuli for a bit, and then you can come back and you can look on things a little differently since you've been away from it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the best solution I have.
Yeah.
And that's in anything. It's not just technology. If you feel like you're really fixated on one thing, just step back for a few weeks and then come back to it and reevaluate why you were even.
Yeah. It's a lot
on it in the
trickier
first place.
Yeah, it's a lot trickier than that in psychology, but that'd be another big rant. But it's about neural
Yeah.
pathways and how much you bind your brain receptors together with habits. But that's a different big science thing. But it's a big part of addiction. Why recovery from addiction is probably one of the hardest things a human could ever do. So
And that's a good topic if you're going to do personal stuff, Colin.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And like, and technology is involved in that too, of like how neural pathways work, but that'll be for another time. There's no way I can get that done in 5 minutes. So all right. Awesome, man. It was good to have you. Thank you for,
thanks for joining us, bro.
the input, man. I appreciate it. Peace. All righty. You just want to do closing thoughts and just see where we got?
Sure.
Maybe wrap religion into it somehow.
I mean, I think maybe we might continue this next week with the religion aspect to it. It's a good breakdown of history. I don't necessarily think that all technology is bad. I think, and even people who might choose to side with the technology, I don't necessarily think that's always a bad thing either.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, how do I say this? I think it's just more nuanced than that. It really is. I don't like making grand black and white statements. I think there is more gray area to it. I'll take the postmodernist position and be like, there is goods and bads, pros and cons. You got to weigh it up. It may be a net negative. It might be a net positive, and that depends on the individual. We can't make distinctive conclusions that it's always going to be a net negative. We just can't say that. But yeah, I do enjoy the discussion. I think it's it's an interesting premise.
Oh yeah.
We'll see. We might continue this next week and probably get into the religion side. I'm not sure why you wanted to take it for the religion side, which is kind of how I started before we jumped on the air. But we'll see. We'll see.
We'll hash it out on Facebook later.
There we go.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I at least want to get people out of this. Rewatch it if you want. Because we talked about like the whole thing was a pretty highbrow discussion. So it might take a couple
big brain
repetitions. Might take a couple repetitions to get through it. But I think if you can get anything out of this, just realize how much technology influences your life. Don't even go to the good or bad yet. We could do that. We could hash that out again later or whatever. But just realize how much of society is based on you, how much you're dependent on other people and technology in your life, right? I think it's super obvious, like recently where we've had the during the whole Backstreet Boys reunion tour, we've had a couple times where supply chains were disrupted and people went apeshit, right? Because but we don't learn our lesson that how much we're dependent on other people. We're still dependent on those now. We were just happy that it got resolved in a week or whatever, right? Like obviously the toilet paper crisis. More recently we had the gas crisis, right? Some of our gas supply got disrupted, and you got to realize how much of that is like how much of our technology and other people's dependencies, especially if you're in big cities. And we didn't even get into the population aspect. I got an hour on that too, but I've studied this too much. But how much you're actually dependent on other people and other technologies to let you live the life you're living right now, right? So I guess just being aware of that is definitely a good first step. That nobody here is really as independent as we think we are. We're very, very tied to technology, for better or worse. So fun. And then hopefully we'll hit the religion aspect next time.
Awesome, man.
Awesome possum. All righty. Well, this has been Religion 052. I hope you all have a good rest of your week and see y'all Sunday.
Take care, guys.